Hello everyone, welcome to or back to the new grid. I'm Kyle, and in today's video I take full self-driving beta 10.8 out on a drive around town, just dropping a few random points. I go through some roundabouts, some various different intersections, and I'm going to show you how it's doing really well at certain stuff, where it can improve, and a little bit more in depth on how version 11 of full self-driving is going to be a lot better than what version 10 is once they get all the training data set in. So with that, let's get started. My first little clip is just going through this first roundabout. We come to a stop right at the start of this roundabout, which isn't ideal because there's no one in this roundabout. So why do we need to be stopping there and waiting for a significant amount of time, in my opinion? And we also are turning our turn signals on to go through these. I don't really like that, but nonetheless it does take off on its own and get through this roundabout without any issue. So next we head into another roundabout. This one actually has quite a bit of traffic. It does pretty well at getting to the start of the roundabout and slowing down to check for traffic. Now, in this case, where it takes off, I probably would have waited at that point because there was a car that could have potentially either been getting out of the roundabout or continuing on into it. And this is an area where I think version 11 is going to be a big improvement on that. The reason why it did this was because it didn't realize that that car was at that position yet. It's got a little bit of latency as to when it realizes where that car's at. So the one thing that I noticed with doing this is that because of that latency, it thought, oh, it's fine, it'll take off. Now, if it didn't have that latency, I probably would have taken off earlier, about the time that it actually thought it was taking off with the process data that it had. Now, with that said, that car that was in the roundabout did exit, so there was definitely no issue, but that's something that I think version 11 will improve upon because it basically will have the ability to know that where stuff is a lot sooner than where it is in version 10, because version 10 still has a bunch of pre-processing going on with the video, so that adds up some time before the AI actually gets the data. So now when we get to version 11, there is a lot of retraining that has to happen because they're getting rid of all that pre-processing and just going straight for the raw camera feeds from around the vehicle. So there will be a lot of improvements as that delay is gone, but it will take a little bit of time to get the data that they need to actually train the AI based on these now clips that are raw images rather than some pre-processed data. So with UI 11, there's some pros and cons to it. I really like the overall design of it, but for having beta visualization up full screen, I don't like the fact that I've got to minimize that all the way to the quarter screen. Maybe they could have a half point stopping spot for that, because then you don't have that much of a map area to touch in. So you have to close it to touch to get to a new point to navigate to. That's one thing I don't completely like, but maybe that's because they're trying to move more to voice commands to navigate you places. Here I thought it did a really good job at deciding that it needed to pick the right lane rather than the left lane, because right here the left lane is a turn only lane and the right lane is the lane that goes straight through. Now, whether that was determined by navigation data or something else, that's to be determined, but it did do a good job handling which path to choose, and that's kind of one of those spots where it was close to deciding which one should it be in and needed to pick one of the two, and it isn't the clearest markings, but it did pick the correct lane. Here we had a place where a car pulls out. It's an okay distance, plenty fine. I was approaching a stoplight, but Beta was starting to slow down as that car got in front of us for that stoplight and for that car, which I think was perfect. It was smooth, it stopped perfectly. So it's just an area that it was really decent. I just wanted to point out that that's what it was doing here, and it did fine. Now here's where we get into a navigation issue that I see a lot that I don't really care for with Beta, is it has to pick a lane. So instead of picking the left lane of the two lanes when we're going to be making a left-hand turn fairly quickly, it decides that for navigation, as it says on the screen, that it needs to get over to the right lane to continue through this intersection. Now me, I haven't been through here in a while. I didn't even realize that you could go through this intersection without ending up in a turn-only lane right on the other side. So basically, as it got to the other side, it did end up saying, oh, we need to get back over for navigation. So that's an area that it's just a little bit weird that we want to get over for a tenth of a mile through an intersection, then get right back over because we're going to be turning fairly quickly. So that's one thing that I've noticed with other places, and I'll also include a clip at the end of this to show you how it was performing in another area that it did similar behavior to this. Now we enter into a subdivision that I've never been in, and basically we get in there where it's fine, and then we get to a place where the road just does a 90-degree turn and Beta stops. I'm actually thinking, okay, I hit my destination point because it was right there, so I start switching navigation. But it does end up continuing on to the exact point, and it's got to go through some pretty close cars on both sides because there's a lot of cars parked on the sides of the road, and it does fine with that. So I get my new point in, it starts going, it makes a turn to go out, and it has to go around a car. It does flawlessly there. There's also brush on the side of the road that sticks way out into the lane line, and it stayed away from that, which I was very happy to see that it would do that. But if you look at the intersection here, this is one that you can't see anything around. I couldn't see anything around, and I was more reliant on myself at that point because I didn't feel that I needed to put Beta through that test. But looking back at this footage, I can see that Beta actually could see pretty much so exactly what I was seeing. Now, again, we go back to that delay that it has. With that delay, it wouldn't have been great at predicting when to go. But without that delay, I think it would have done perfectly fine and went at the same point that I would have went to leave here. Now, in my opinion, I probably wouldn't navigate back to this spot to leave that area that way because there can be a lot of traffic on that road that I was going out onto. So I would have taken a different route to get to that place in the future. So that's something also to consider, is if there's a lot of obstruction, maybe Beta needs to reroute a different way once it's learned that, hey, we can't really see here. It's not safe for us to go this way. We should go a different way. So now I've basically pulled out. The light turns yellow right as I'm entering it, and I'm not exactly sure on where that is, so I just stop and reverse because it seems safest at the moment. And then basically when this light turns green, we end up getting through it, and that's pretty much the end of my video right there that I recorded. So now let's get to the point where I had another spot in the drive later on that Beta decides that it needs to get into the left lane. There was no cars in front of me that I was going to be passing, but it decides that it needs to get over the left lane to follow route. So here's another situation where it just is weird because I'm getting ready to make a right-hand turn. So I was thinking about this one a little bit more and more, and probably a few months ago, you did have to get into that left lane because the right lane was closed ahead. So that kind of is their band-aid with navigation data to fix some of the issues that they don't have taken care of. So they don't remember the signs and whatnot for road construction, so they don't know how to properly handle those yet. But when they do know how to handle them, and remember that, hey, we are in a construction zone, that's going to be something that comes with version 11 a lot more. So that's the stuff that they were talking about with AI Day, is that they're going to have some variables that they pass in and stuff that they start remembering. And that's what I've kind of noticed with this version 10, is there's really not a lot that it remembers. So that's where I think we're going to see a lot of improvements with version 11. But again, there's a lot of data that needs retrained first because it's not being pre-processed. And once that's done, we're going to have extremely good feedback. And I think that's why they're continuing the 10.9 for the next release, because there's more data that they want to collect to train version 11 on. And that's what they're doing, is as they're finding stuff that they need more information on with version 11 to make it safe to roll out, they're releasing us more version 10s to help train and collect that data that they really want. So with that, thanks for watching. I do plan on having a video come out Monday morning on a potential stock thing that Tesla's going to be doing soon. So please consider subscribing so that you can be notified of that, because if everything happens the way that I think it may, you'll want to be watching that video Monday. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.